The infamous Black Dahlia. Who did it? The story of the Black Dahlia begins in the bustling city of Los Angeles during the post-World War II era. It was a time when Hollywood dreams drew thousands of hopefuls seeking fame and fortune. On January 15th, 1947, the city was shaken by the discovery of a gruesome crime that captured the imagination of the public and the media. The victim, a young woman named Elizabeth Short, was found brutally murdered, and her case became one of the most infamous unsolved mysteries in American history. This narrative aims to provide a comprehensive and engaging retelling of the Black Dahlia case, focusing on the life of Elizabeth Short, the circumstances of her death, the ensuing investigation, the various suspects and theories, and the lasting cultural impact of the case. The story is written in a way that respects the victim while exploring the broader context of the era. Setting the scene, Los Angeles in the 1940s. The geography of Los Angeles played a role in shaping the city's culture. The city's sprawling layout meant that different neighborhoods developed distinct identities. Hollywood was the epicenter of the film industry, with its studios, theaters, and celebrity homes. Downtown Los Angeles, with its Art Deco architecture and historic buildings, served as the commercial and administrative heart of the city. Meanwhile, neighborhoods like Boyle Heights and Watts were predominantly working class and home to diverse immigrant communities. The city's reliance on automobiles and expanding freeway system made it possible for residents to travel long distances across the metropolitan area. But it also contributed to social isolation. The separation between affluent and impoverished areas reflected broader economic disparities in post-war America. Entertainment in the 1940s extended beyond the silver screen. Nightclubs, jazz bars, and dance halls were popular, drawing crowds looking to unwind after long work days. Musicians from across the country performed in Los Angeles, including Duke Ellington, Charlie Parker, and Billie Holiday, turning the city into a hub for jazz and swing. These venues were often integrated, providing rare opportunities for people of different races to socialize. However, segregation persisted in many parts of the city, particularly in housing and employment. The tensions created by these social divides occasionally erupted into violence, such as the Zoot Suit riots of 1943, in which servicemen attacked Mexican-American youths. This tension contributed to a volatile social climate in which crimes like the Black Dahlia murder could occur unnoticed. During this era, the motion picture industry produced iconic films that mirrored the anxieties and aspirations of the time. Film noir, with its dark themes and morally ambiguous characters, reflected the public's fascination with crime and corruption. Movies like Double Indemnity, The Postman Always Rings Twice, and The Big Sleep portrayed detectives navigating a shadowy world of deceit. Audiences were captivated by these stories, which blurred the line between reality and fiction. The Black Dahlia case, with its sinister overtones and mysterious killer, seemed to leap directly from the script of a film noir, further reinforcing public fascination. Los Angeles's growing population also strained infrastructure. Water shortages, traffic congestion, and housing shortages became urgent issues. The city's infrastructure was not equipped to handle such rapid growth, leading to haphazard development and poor living conditions in many areas. This environment made it easier for criminals to operate in the shadows. The police force, already stretched thin, struggled to patrol the vast expanse of the city effectively. These challenges underscore the difficulties authorities faced in solving major crimes, including the Black Dahlia case. Los Angeles in the 1940s was also a place of stark contrasts between the wealthy elite and the working poor. The city's rapid expansion had drawn workers from across the country and around the world. The aerospace industry, fueled by defense contracts during the war, brought prosperity to many workers, while the entertainment industry flourished with the rise of film noir, a cinematic style that mirrored the dark mood of the times. The war had introduced many to Los Angeles, including soldiers who passed through and later returned to settle. Mexican and African American communities grew as laborers sought jobs in defense plants and shipyards. Housing was scarce in many areas, and racial tensions ran high as competition for jobs and housing intensified. A series of race riots and labor strikes erupted in the years before the Black Dahlia murder, revealing deep social divisions. The city was not just a land of opportunity. It was also a place where dreams were broken and people could easily vanish into the urban sprawl. The shadow of organized crime loomed large over Los Angeles. Criminal syndicates, including the so-called combination, operated illegal gambling rings, prostitution networks, and narcotics trafficking. Corruption in the police force was an open secret, with officers often turning a blind eye to certain criminal enterprises in exchange for bribes. The Black Dahlia murder took place against this backdrop of crime and corruption, making it difficult to separate fact from rumor and complicating the investigation. The war years also saw a shift in women's roles. With many men away fighting, women entered the workforce in large numbers, taking on jobs that had been traditionally reserved for men. This newfound independence brought both opportunities and challenges. Women were encouraged to be strong and capable, yet societal expectations for them remained conservative. In the post-war period, the pressure to return to domestic roles clashed with the desires of those who had tasted independence. Elizabeth Short, like many young women of the time, moved freely in search of work and adventure, embodying the contradictions of her era. Los Angeles in the mid-1940s was a city in transition. The end of World War II brought a surge of optimism and prosperity to many parts of the United States, and Hollywood was at the heart of this new era. The movie industry was booming, producing stars and films that captivated audiences worldwide. The city's glamorous reputation attracted countless young women, often dubbed starlets, who hoped to catch a break in the entertainment business. However, beneath the glitz and glamour lay a darker reality. The rapid growth of Los Angeles brought with it the challenges of urban expansion. The city struggled with issues like corruption, organized crime, poverty, and social inequality. Downtown Los Angeles was a patchwork of wealthy neighborhoods and impoverished areas, and the sharp contrast between the two became a breeding ground for crime and exploitation. In this environment, the police force was under constant pressure to maintain order and address the rising crime rate. Homicides, robberies, and other violent crimes were not uncommon, and the Los Angeles Police Department, LAPD, often found itself in the spotlight for failing to solve high-profile cases. The Black Dahlia case would soon become one of these high-profile mysteries. Who was Elizabeth Short? Elizabeth's personal experiences shaped her outlook on life. She had a complicated relationship with her family, particularly with her father, whose abandonment left lasting emotional scars. Letters exchanged between Elizabeth and her mother reveal her longing for stability and love. Despite her occasional bravado, she was vulnerable, often seeking companionship and security in relationships. When she lived in Florida, Elizabeth met a U.S. Army airman named Major Matthew Gordon, Jr., who was recovering from injuries sustained in World War II. The two reportedly became engaged, and Elizabeth believed they would marry once he returned from his recovery. Tragically, Gordon died in a plane crash in India in August 1945, shattering Elizabeth's hopes. After his death, she wore a ring he had given her and sometimes used his last name, calling herself Elizabeth Short Gordon. This period of grief highlights the fragility beneath her carefree social exterior. Elizabeth's time in the South and Midwest also introduced her to a variety of people and experiences. In Florida, she worked as a waitress in Army-based restaurants and dance halls where she entertained soldiers. She developed a penchant for dance and music, often participating in social events and performing for small crowds. In Massachusetts, she volunteered at the local Veterans of Foreign Wars post, contributing to the war effort by raising morale. These experiences show her commitment to helping others and her desire for adventure. As she moved west, she continued to pursue her dream of performing. She attended casting calls and auditions in Los Angeles, hoping to break into acting. Despite her efforts, she never landed a role. Some friends speculated that she struggled to be taken seriously because of her transient lifestyle and lack of industry connections. Others believed she simply lacked the acting skills necessary to succeed. Nevertheless, she remained hopeful, often speaking of future opportunities. In the months leading up to her death, Elizabeth tried to reconnect with her father. She visited him in San Francisco, but the relationship remained strained. After a brief stay, she returned to Los Angeles and resumed her search for work. Her determination to find success, even in the face of repeated setbacks, underscores her resilience and tenacity. Elizabeth's early life was marked by instability and shifting family dynamics. When her father left, the family was thrust into poverty, forcing Elizabeth and her sisters to move frequently. Elizabeth's mother took on various jobs to support the family, instilling in her daughter a sense of resilience. During her teenage years, Elizabeth struggled with chronic asthma and underwent lung surgery, which led doctors to advise her to live in warmer climates. This medical advice may have influenced her decision to spend time in Florida and later California, where the climate was milder than in New England. Elizabeth had a fascination with movies and fashion. She admired glamorous actresses like Veronica Lake and Rita Hayworth, and often emulated their styles with her own twist. She wore stylish clothing, and her distinctive choice of black clothes and dyed hair contributed to her later nickname. Friends from Massachusetts recalled her as someone who was friendly and personable, although sometimes distant. Her ability to make friends quickly aided her whenever she relocated, allowing her to integrate into new social circles. When Elizabeth arrived in California permanently in 1946, she stayed briefly with family friends before seeking independence. She found work as a waitress in downtown Los Angeles and at various establishments in Hollywood. These jobs provided enough to cover her rent and meals, but little else. Living in boarding houses and cheap hotels, Elizabeth managed a precarious existence, often relying on the kindness of acquaintances and short-term partners. Elizabeth's romantic relationships were short and often unstable. Some partners were soldiers or officers stationed in California. Others were men she met in bars or clubs. While there were rumors about her involvement with individuals linked to crime, there is no evidence that Elizabeth had any association with organized crime. Her social life gave her a reputation for being an adventurous young woman who enjoyed nightlife, but such a reputation also made her vulnerable to gossip and speculation. Elizabeth Ann Short was born in 1924 in Boston, Massachusetts, to Cleo and Phoebe Short. She was the third of 5 daughters. Her father was a successful businessman in the flour trade during the 1920s, and the family enjoyed a comfortable life until the onset of the Great Depression. In 1930, Cleo Short's business collapsed, and he abandoned the family, leaving them in financial ruin. Phoebe Short was left to raise her 5 daughters alone. Elizabeth grew up in challenging circumstances. She was a beautiful young woman with striking dark hair and pale skin, often described as having a delicate movie star appearance. Her friends and acquaintances would later say that she dreamed of becoming an actress or a model. Elizabeth's life was marked by frequent moves. After living in the Boston area, she spent time in Florida, California, and Massachusetts. She visited her father in California in the early 1940s and stayed for a period before eventually moving to the West Coast permanently in 1946. Her itinerant lifestyle reflected both her personal restlessness and the difficulty of finding stability during those times. Despite her striking looks and dreams of stardom, Elizabeth struggled to find consistent employment or a reliable source of income. She had a series of short relationships, worked as a waitress, and occasionally took up clerical jobs. Her social life was busy. She often frequented nightclubs and bars and had a wide circle of acquaintances. Although some described her as friendly and outgoing, others saw her as naive and easily trusting. The press would later paint Elizabeth in various lights, sometimes glamorizing her as a Hollywood hopeful, sometimes vilifying her as an aimless drifter. The complexity of her life and the mystery of her death made her a subject of intense speculation and sensational stories. The discovery of the body. The discovery of the body was a traumatic event for those involved. Betty Bersinger later recounted how she initially thought the body was a mannequin from a department store, perhaps discarded after the holiday season. As she approached, the horrific reality became clear, and she rushed to the nearest house to call the police. The scene quickly became chaotic as curious neighbors gathered and the police cordoned off the area. The press, tipped off by police radio transmissions, arrived with photographers who captured images that would soon appear on front pages across the country. At the coroner's office, Dr. Frederick Newbar and his team conducted a detailed examination. They determined that the body had been drained of blood, likely during or shortly after death. The cuts at the waist were clean and precise, with no signs of jagged tearing, suggesting the use of a surgical instrument. The face had been slashed from the corners of the mouth to the ears, creating an eerie grin. The body bore evidence of bruising that indicated she had been bound, and there were signs of sexual assault. These details were not initially shared with the public but were later leaked to the press, fueling sensational coverage. Investigators considered the possibility that the body had been transported in pieces and assembled at the dumping site. The absence of blood and lack of drag marks supported the theory that the killer had parked near the vacant lot and placed the pieces carefully on the ground. The body's pose, with arms over the head and legs spread, suggested deliberate staging. This level of staging indicated either a ritualistic element to the crime or a desire to humiliate the victim post-mortem. The mutilations led some investigators to theorize that the killer had medical training. Dr. Newbar could not conclusively determine whether the cuts were made by someone with formal surgical knowledge. However, the precision did suggest familiarity with cutting instruments. Later, speculation proposed that a butcher or someone accustomed to animal dissection could have achieved the same level of precision. Witnesses in the neighborhood reported seeing a dark-colored sedan parked near the vacant lot in the early morning hours of January 15th. A man was seen placing something in the lot, but his identity remained unknown. The value of these witness statements diminished as time passed and the media shaped public recollections. Police struggled to separate genuine leads from false sightings and hearsay. On the morning of January 15, 1947, a mother named Betty Bersinger was walking with her 3-year-old daughter in the neighborhood of Leimert Park in Los Angeles. As they passed a vacant lot near a sidewalk, they saw something that looked like a mannequin or mannequin parts lying in the grass. Upon closer inspection, Bersinger realized it was not a mannequin but the body of a woman. The body was split in two at the waist, and the two parts were positioned a short distance from each other. The skin was pale and bloodless. There was no blood at the scene, indicating the body had been cleaned and transported there from another location. The body had been posed with the arms raised and legs splayed. Cuts and lacerations covered the body, including mutilations of the face. The shocking scene prompted Bersinger to alert the authorities, and soon the area was swarming with police and reporters. The LAPD faced a challenge that they had seldom encountered, a crime scene that had clearly been staged and meticulously cleaned. Investigators noted the precision of the cuts, leading some to speculate that the killer might have had a medical or surgical training. Others believed it could have been someone with experience in butchery. The lack of blood and absence of any obvious clues at the scene left detectives with little to go on. The body was transported to the coroner's office, where further examination revealed additional details. The victim had been drained of blood, and the cuts had been made with careful precision. The face was bruised and beaten, and there were rope marks on the wrists and ankles. A unique pattern of cuts, known as a Glasgow smile, had been carved into the cheeks. Because Elizabeth Short's fingerprints were already on file from previous interactions with law enforcement and employment applications, the FBI was able to identify her within hours of sending her prints to Washington, D.C. The identification of the victim allowed investigators to begin piecing together her life and movements leading up to the murder. The investigation begins. The complexity of the investigation was compounded by the number of people involved. Each detective brought a different perspective, and the size of the task force meant that information could be misinterpreted or miscommunicated. For instance, Detective Harry Hansen believed the killer was a lone psychopath with medical knowledge, while Detective Finis Brown leaned toward the theory that the crime was linked to Hollywood's underworld. These differing opinions created tension within the team and affected the direction of the investigation. In the weeks after the murder, detectives received tips from across the country. Some letters came from as far away as New York and Chicago, claiming that the writer had seen suspicious individuals who fit the description of the killer. Others claimed to have overheard confessions in bars or received confessions from acquaintances. Detectives chased these leads, traveling across states to interview potential witnesses. Most turned out to be dead ends. One notable lead involved a man who mailed a handbag and a shoe to the police, claiming they were Elizabeth Short's belongings. Detectives traced the package to an apartment building in downtown Los Angeles. However, the investigation revealed that the items likely belonged to another woman, and the lead was abandoned. Another lead centered on a local slaughterhouse, where some believed an employee had the skills necessary to dismember a body. Police interviewed workers and inspected tools but found no evidence connecting any employee to the crime. The police also explored the possibility that the crime was committed by a serial offender. Throughout the 1940s and early 1950s, several cases involving mutilated bodies were reported in the Los Angeles area. Detectives drew parallels between these crimes and the Black Dahlia murder, considering whether they might be the work of the same person. Although the similarities were intriguing, investigators could not establish a definitive link. Modern researchers continue to speculate about these potential connections, but without forensic evidence, the theory remains speculative. Investigators interviewed dentists and medical professionals, hoping that someone might recognize the surgical technique used to cut Elizabeth's body. They also canvassed local medical schools, looking for students or professors who may have exhibited suspicious behavior. No one emerged as a viable suspect. These efforts demonstrate the thoroughness of the investigation, despite its ultimate failure to identify the killer. Following the body's discovery, the LAPD formed a task force to handle the investigation. Captain Jack Donahoe oversaw the effort, while detectives such as Harry Hansen and Finis Brown spearheaded the casework. Lieutenant John Fitzgerald coordinated with the FBI to cross-reference fingerprints and criminal records. Detectives searched for connections between Elizabeth Short and known criminals, but no definitive link was found. Police interviewed hundreds of individuals, including Elizabeth's friends, former employers, roommates, and romantic partners. The questions focused on her movements during the days leading up to her death. Unfortunately, the time elapsed between her last confirmed sighting and the discovery of her body allowed the trail to grow cold. Several witnesses reported seeing Elizabeth at various locations across Los Angeles: a bar on Hollywood Boulevard, a cafe near 3rd Street, and a party in the Hollywood Hills. Many such reports conflicted with each other, and verifying them proved difficult. The LAPD also examined leads related to the letters sent to the press. Handwriting experts attempted to analyze the notes, but the letters contained deliberately messy writing, making it difficult to identify the sender. A copy of the address book found in one letter led investigators to question all 75 names listed within. Many of these individuals did not know Elizabeth personally. Some had met her only briefly, and others had never heard of her. This led to speculation that the address book might have been a prop or belonged to someone else who had crossed paths with Elizabeth. Detectives considered the theory that Elizabeth might have been murdered by a jealous boyfriend or a spurned lover. They questioned numerous men who had dated or interacted with her, but none provided a clear link to the crime. Theories that she was involved with high-ranking officials or crime bosses also circulated, but investigators found no evidence of such connections. The case's high profile attracted hoax calls and false leads, which consumed precious resources. Despite the enormous effort, the investigation stalled. The absence of forensic evidence, the lack of reliable witnesses, and the sheer volume of misinformation made progress difficult. Detectives found themselves chasing rumors and speculation rather than concrete leads. As the months wore on, resources were diverted to other cases, and the Black Dahlia investigation was eventually relegated to cold case status, periodically revived whenever new theories emerged. The LAPD launched a massive investigation into Elizabeth Short's murder. Detectives questioned hundreds of people, canvassing friends, acquaintances, and potential witnesses. The media dubbed the victim the Black Dahlia, inspired by the Blue Dahlia film and the black clothing Elizabeth was rumored to wear. The nickname created an aura of mystery and glamour around the case, which drew intense public interest. From the start, the investigation was hampered by inaccurate reports, conflicting witness statements, and sensationalized coverage in newspapers. Reporters often got access to sensitive information and published it, leading to a mix of factual and speculative reporting. The public, already fascinated by Hollywood stories, consumed these accounts eagerly, further pressuring investigators to solve the case quickly. One of the key challenges faced by detectives was determining Elizabeth Short's whereabouts in the days and weeks before her death. Her transient lifestyle made it difficult to establish a reliable timeline. She was known to have been seen in several Los Angeles locations in early January 1947. Some reports suggested she stayed at a hotel with a man, while others placed her at a house party in Hollywood. A letter, mailed to a newspaper on January 21, 1947, purportedly from the murderer, claimed responsibility for the crime. The letter included personal items belonging to Elizabeth Short, such as her birth certificate, business cards, photographs, and an address book. The letter's author taunted the police, boasting about the crime and promising to turn themselves in. However, no arrest followed based on this letter, and authorities could not confirm its authenticity. Another letter, also claiming to be from the killer, outlined a location where police could find some of Elizabeth's belongings. Investigators did find the items, but there was no further evidence that the letter writer was the murderer. The investigation into these letters led to more questions than answers, and the identity of the letter writer remained unknown. The media circus. Beyond the printed press, radio broadcasts amplified public interest. True crime stories and mysteries were popular radio content in the 1940s. After the Black Dahlia case broke, radio hosts invited journalists and self-proclaimed experts to discuss the case on air. These discussions often included speculation about suspects and motives. Some radio shows invited listeners to call in with tips or theories, which were then relayed to law enforcement. While this increased public involvement, it also added to the chaos, as false tips flooded police hotlines. Documentary films and newsreels covered the case extensively. In the days after the body's discovery, newsreels showed shots of the crime scene, the vacant lot, and interviews with police officials. These visual stories, shown in movie theaters before feature films, provided viewers with a glimpse into the investigation. Newsreels, however, were often edited for dramatic effect, focusing on the gruesome aspects of the case rather than the human story behind it. In the years following the murder, books began to appear, each offering a different take on the events. Some authors claimed to have inside information from anonymous sources, while others approached the case from a historical perspective, examining the cultural context of post-war Los Angeles. Some books speculated that the murder was part of a larger conspiracy involving powerful figures in Hollywood, organized crime, or government agencies. These theories fed into the public's fascination with corruption and cover-ups. Television, which emerged as a dominant medium in the 1950s and 1960s, further popularized the Black Dahlia story. Crime dramas and investigative programs featured reenactments of the case, often exaggerating details to capture viewers' attention. Episodes of shows like Unsolved Mysteries and Cold Case Files revisited the Black Dahlia murder, offering audiences glimpses of old photographs, police reports, and expert commentary. This continued exposure ensured that the case remained in the public consciousness, long after other crimes of the era had faded from memory. The media's treatment of the Black Dahlia case also influenced the way subsequent cases were covered. Sensationalist reporting became a standard feature of true crime stories, with journalists vying to outdo one another in crafting shocking headlines. While this approach increased readership and revenue, it often came at the expense of accuracy and sensitivity. The Black Dahlia case thus serves as an early example of the complex relationship between journalism and crime, illustrating how media coverage can simultaneously inform, misinform, and captivate audiences. The media coverage of the Black Dahlia case played a crucial role in shaping public perceptions. Newspapers like the Los Angeles Herald-Express and the Los Angeles Examiner competed for scoops, frequently printing sensational headlines and unverified claims. Some reporters bribed police officers for access to evidence, while others fabricated stories to maintain reader interest. One false story claimed that Elizabeth Short had been involved in illicit activities with prominent figures in Hollywood, fueling scandal. Another article printed excerpts from a diary that turned out to be a forgery created by a reporter. The sensationalism created an image of Elizabeth Short that was sometimes far removed from reality. She was alternately portrayed as an innocent victim, a femme fatale, or a delinquent, depending on the angle the newspaper chose. Photographs of Elizabeth were often glamorized or manipulated to fit these narratives. One widely circulated photograph showed her wearing a flower in her hair, reminiscent of a film star's publicity shot, while another image was a mug shot from her arrest for underage drinking, which portrayed her in a less flattering light. The media's portrayal of Elizabeth and the crime reflected broader societal anxieties. Stories about the vulnerability of young women seeking fame resonated with readers who were both fascinated and repelled by Hollywood. The coverage also reinforced certain stereotypes about women, blaming them for their misfortunes or portraying them as morally ambiguous. Meanwhile, the press used the sensational crime to boost sales and engaged in fierce competition that sometimes disregarded journalistic ethics. As the investigation dragged on, the press turned its attention to the police department, criticizing the lack of progress. Headlines questioned the competence of the LAPD, and some articles accused the department of corruption. These accusations were not entirely unfounded. Subsequent investigations into the LAPD uncovered cases of bribery and misconduct. The Black Dahlia case became a symbol of the department's failures, and it contributed to calls for reform and greater accountability in law enforcement. Despite its negative aspects, the media coverage kept the case in the public eye, inspiring artists, writers, and filmmakers to explore the mystery from different angles. Over the years, the Black Dahlia story would become a fixture in true crime literature and a cautionary tale about the dangers of sensational reporting. The Black Dahlia case quickly became a media sensation. Newspapers ran daily stories about the investigation, often sensationalizing details and fabricating information to attract readers. One tabloid printed fabricated diary entries allegedly written by Elizabeth Short, painting her in a negative light. Other papers published inaccurate statements about her personal life, relationships, and movements. The intense media coverage had a twofold effect. It kept the public engaged and informed about the investigation, but it also led to misinformation and hindered the police's efforts. Reporters often called the police department for updates, sometimes bribing officials for tips. In some cases, they printed unverified rumors, leading to confusion among investigators and the public. The publicity attracted a wide range of people who confessed to the murder for various reasons. Some confessions came from mentally unstable individuals seeking attention, while others hoped to gain notoriety. Each confession had to be investigated, further stretching police resources. None of these confessions proved to be genuine, and many were quickly dismissed. The pressure on the LAPD increased as weeks turned into months without a significant breakthrough. Critics argued that the department was not competent enough, pointing to corruption and disorganization within the force. The LAPD commissioner, under intense scrutiny, promised a thorough and unbiased investigation. However, the public's confidence waned with each passing day. Suspects and theories. Beyond the suspects discussed earlier, many other names emerged over the years. One was Leslie Dillon, a bellhop and aspiring writer. Dillon corresponded with Los Angeles police psychiatrist Dr. J. Paul DeRiver, claiming knowledge of the murder. Dillon's letters suggested he had insider information, but he claimed to be writing a book about the case. When the police questioned him, he named a friend he believed to be the killer. Dillon later recanted, and the investigation into his involvement ended without any charges. Another suspect was a convict named Jack Wilson, who claimed he knew the Black Dahlia killer. Wilson alleged that a friend, who had been a medical student, had confessed to the crime while drunk. Wilson's claims contained factual inaccuracies about the case, leading detectives to dismiss them. A doctor, named Patrick S. O'Reilly, was also considered by some to be a suspect. He had connections to the police and was known to frequent the same nightlife spots as Elizabeth Short. O'Reilly had a history of violence. He had once assaulted a woman. However, like many other suspects, he had an alibi for the time of the murder, and no physical evidence tied him to the crime. Suspects also included a series of individuals who confessed in the years after the crime. Some of these confessions were clearly false, stemming from mental illness or a desire for notoriety. Others came from people who wanted to take credit for the crime as part of a larger pattern of attention-seeking behavior. Police investigated each confession diligently, but none of them matched the known facts of the case. In the 1960s, a man named Janice Knowlton claimed that her father, George Knowlton, was the killer. She said he had murdered Elizabeth and driven her out to the desert, where he cut the body in half. Knowlton wrote a book describing this theory, but no evidence supported her claims. Similarly, in 2013, author Pew Eatwell proposed that a bellhop named Leslie Dillon and a Hollywood nightclub operator were responsible for the murder, but again there was no conclusive proof. The sheer number of suspects illustrates the enduring fascination with the Black Dahlia case and the difficulty of sifting through rumors, unverified accounts, and genuine leads. Without definitive forensic evidence, each theory remains speculative. The case has become a canvas for storytellers, detectives, and conspiracy theorists, each adding a new layer to the mystery. Over the decades, dozens of suspects have been proposed for the Black Dahlia murder. Some suspects were briefly considered and dismissed, while others gained attention through books, articles, and documentaries. Since the case remains unsolved, the truth about the killer's identity has never been definitively proven. Here are some of the notable suspects and theories that have emerged over the years. 1. Robert "Red" Manley. Robert Manley, known as Red, was one of the last people known to have seen Elizabeth Short alive. He was a traveling salesman who met Elizabeth shortly before her death. Manley drove Elizabeth from San Diego to Los Angeles, where she stayed at the Biltmore Hotel. He later reported to police that he dropped her off and never saw her again. Manley cooperated fully with investigators, took a polygraph test, and was cleared as a suspect. Manley's involvement in the case, nevertheless, fueled speculation. Some theories suggested that he knew more than he revealed, but there was no evidence to support these claims. In the context of the investigation, Manley is a notable figure because he provided crucial information about Elizabeth's movements prior to her disappearance. 2. Mark Hansen. Mark Hansen was a Hollywood nightclub owner and former studio executive. He became a person of interest because Elizabeth Short had stayed at one of his establishments and had reportedly asked him for a room. She also had his name in her address book, which was found among her belongings. Hansen initially cooperated with investigators, but later refused to answer further questions. Rumors circulated that Hansen might have had a personal relationship with Elizabeth, or that he had connections to organized crime. However, there was no concrete evidence linking him to the murder. Over time, Hansen's connection to the case faded as other suspects emerged. 3. George Hodel. One of the most controversial theories involves a doctor named George Hodel, who was a prominent physician and socialite in Los Angeles. Decades after the Black Dahlia case, Hodel's own son, Steve Hodel, a former LAPD detective, accused his father of being the murderer. Steve Hodel's theory is based on journal entries, photographs, and police records he discovered after his father's death. Steve Hodel argues that his father had the surgical expertise to perform the precise cuts seen on Elizabeth Short's body. He also points to a transcript of a police wiretap at the Hodel residence, where George Hodel was allegedly heard saying he would be charged with murder if the police knew what he did. Although intriguing, These claims remain unverified, and George Hodel was never charged with the crime during his lifetime. Critics argue that the evidence is largely circumstantial, and that Hodel's wealth and connections may have protected him from serious investigation. 4. Walter Bailey. Another suspect is Walter Bailey, a surgeon who lived near the site where the body was found. Bailey's daughter was a friend of Elizabeth's sister, and Bailey's estranged wife allegedly received threatening phone calls around the time of the murder. The theory suggests that Bailey's medical knowledge and personal connections could have linked him to the crime. However, investigators never found evidence to implicate him. 5. Other theories. Numerous other suspects have been proposed, including a mortician, a writer, and various drifters passing through Los Angeles. Some amateur sleuths believe the murder was the work of more than one person, citing the complexity of the dismemberment and the posing of the body. Others speculate that the killer might have been a soldier or sailor with medical training, or a psychopath inspired by similar crimes. Over the years, some authors have connected the Black Dahlia case to other unsolved murders, such as the Cleveland torso murders or other cases involving mutilated bodies. These theories remain speculative and have not been supported by conclusive evidence. The diversity of suspects and theories underscores the difficulties faced by investigators in a time before modern forensic technology. Impact on law enforcement and society. The Black Dahlia case had a profound impact on law enforcement practices and the public's perception of crime. The intense media coverage and public fascination with the case highlighted the need for improved communication between police departments and the press. The case also underscored the importance of preserving evidence, maintaining the integrity of crime scenes, and developing forensic techniques. In the decades following the case, advancements in fingerprinting, blood analysis, and DNA profiling revolutionized homicide investigations. The case also exposed the limitations of the LAPD in dealing with high-profile crimes. Corruption and bureaucratic inefficiencies were prevalent in the department, affecting its ability to solve the case. The failure to identify the killer contributed to a loss of public trust in the police. The case remains a cautionary tale about the consequences of sensational journalism and the necessity of ethical reporting. From a social perspective, the case sparked discussions about the treatment of women in the entertainment industry and the vulnerability of aspiring actresses. Hollywood in the 1940s was rife with exploitation, and many young women faced predatory behavior from powerful men. The tragic story of Elizabeth Short became emblematic of the darker side of the Hollywood dream. Cultural legacy. Another significant aspect of the Black Dahlia's cultural legacy is its influence on women's representation in crime stories. Elizabeth Short's case has been referenced in feminist critiques of true crime media, highlighting how female victims are often sensationalized and reduced to archetypes. The narrative around Elizabeth often focused on her appearance, social life, and alleged promiscuity, overlooking the societal factors that contributed to her vulnerability. Feminist scholars argue that the way the Black Dahlia was portrayed in the media reinforced stereotypes of women as temptresses or fallen angels. This criticism has led to more nuanced approaches in contemporary true crime narratives, emphasizing the victim's humanity and systemic issues over lurid details. The Black Dahlia case also influenced urban mythology in Los Angeles. The vacant lot where Elizabeth's body was found has become a site of ghost stories and paranormal speculation. Some locals claim to have seen apparitions or felt an eerie presence near the spot, while others tell tales of hearing whispers or screams at night. These stories, though unverifiable, contribute to the mystery and mystique surrounding the case. Local folklore often blends fact and fiction, creating an environment where the Black Dahlia's legacy is perpetuated through oral tradition and storytelling. Politically, The case has been referenced in discussions about policing and justice reform. The failure to solve the Black Dahlia murder is cited in arguments for better training, accountability, and funding for homicide investigations. It highlights the need for cooperation between law enforcement agencies and the importance of investing in forensic laboratories and technology. The case also underscores the importance of ethical journalism and the responsibility of the media to report accurately and sensitively. Finally, the Black Dahlia story has been used as a teaching tool in creative writing and journalism courses. Students analyze the case to understand the structure of narrative, character development, and the impact of storytelling on public perception. Writers are encouraged to consider the ethical implications of using real people as characters in fiction and to develop empathy for victims while crafting engaging narratives. Thus, the Black Dahlia case continues to shape not only popular culture, but also academic discourse and professional practice in multiple fields. Modern interest in the Black Dahlia continues to grow through podcasts, television series, and online communities. True crime enthusiasts dissect the case on forums, comparing notes and debating theories. Documentaries and docuseries often revisit the case, presenting new interviews, archival footage, and interpretations. Some productions emphasize the social and cultural context, examining how the case reflects changing attitudes toward women, crime, and the media. One of the most influential fictionalized accounts is James Ellroy's novel, The Black Dahlia, which blends fact with fiction to create a noir narrative set in post-war Los Angeles. The novel follows LAPD detectives investigating a series of murders, including Elizabeth Short's, and explores themes of corruption, obsession, and despair. The story was adapted into a film, further popularizing the case. While creative works like Ellroy's take artistic liberties, they also remind audiences that unsolved mysteries can serve as mirrors for society's fears and fantasies. Academic researchers study the Black Dahlia case to understand how police procedures, forensic technology, and media coverage have evolved since the 1940s. Law enforcement training programs sometimes use the case as an example of what not to do, how prematurely leaking information, mishandling evidence, and allowing speculation to dictate an investigation can hinder justice. The case also appears in sociology and journalism courses as a way to discuss media ethics and the role of sensational reporting in shaping public perception. The Black Dahlia's cultural legacy extends into tourism. Guided tours of Los Angeles include stops at landmarks related to the case, such as the site where the body was found, the Biltmore Hotel where Elizabeth was last seen, and the locations of suspected suspects' homes. Souvenirs and memorabilia referencing the Black Dahlia are sold in shops and online. The commercialization of the case raises ethical questions about profiting from a tragedy, yet it also reflects the persistent curiosity surrounding unsolved crimes. Social media has further fueled interest in the case. Hashtags related to the Black Dahlia allow users to share theories, archival photos, and personal interpretations. Online communities often self-organize investigations, looking through public records, newspapers, and genealogy resources to find new clues. While these efforts rarely produce new evidence, they keep the case alive in public consciousness and demonstrate the ways in which modern technology intersects with historical mystery. As cultural attitudes shift toward recognizing the humanity of crime victims, some modern interpretations focus less on the killer and more on the life of Elizabeth Short. Documentaries and articles have explored her background, giving voice to people who knew her and contextualizing her struggles. This emphasis on the victim's perspective contrasts sharply with earlier sensationalistic portrayals and represents a broader trend in true crime storytelling, centering the experiences of those affected rather than glorifying perpetrators. The Black Dahlia case has endured in popular culture for decades. It has inspired countless books, films, television shows, and documentaries. Novels and movies often dramatize Elizabeth Short's life and death, sometimes inventing new characters or motives. The case's unresolved status allows for endless speculation and reinterpretation, making it a staple of true crime storytelling. Filmmakers and writers have used the Black Dahlia case to explore themes of corruption, misogyny, and the dark underbelly of Hollywood. Some works focus on the sensational aspects of the crime, while others adopt a more psychological or socio-political perspective. The case also has a presence in the world of art and music. Artists have created paintings, sculptures, and multimedia works inspired by the Black Dahlia. Musicians have referenced the case in their lyrics and album art. The enduring fascination with the Black Dahlia speaks to the powerful hold that real-life mysteries have on our imagination. Reflections on the victim. Amid the myths and sensational stories, it is important to remember the person at the center of the case. Elizabeth Short. She was a young woman with dreams and aspirations, struggling to find her place in a challenging world. Her life, like many others, was shaped by the era in which she lived, a time of rapid social change and cultural transformation. Elizabeth Short's tragic death has defined her legacy in the public eye, but it is also a reminder of the countless women whose stories are often overlooked or sensationalized. In telling her story, it is essential to maintain a sense of empathy and respect, acknowledging the complexities of her life without reducing her to a caricature or stereotype. Unsolved cases resonate because they tap into a universal human desire for answers. They compel us to imagine scenarios, evaluate evidence, and consider motives. They also expose the limitations of human knowledge and the fragility of our institutions. Each unsolved case, including the Black Dahlia, invites us to confront our own fears and assumptions. We wonder how such a crime could occur and remain unresolved. We question whether our society values certain lives over others, whether our justice system is equipped to handle every case, and how media narratives shape our collective memory. The Black Dahlia case is emblematic of the unresolved tragedies that linger on the periphery of our history. It acts as a mirror, reflecting the anxieties, biases, and fascinations of each generation that revisits it. The story continues to evolve with each retelling, influenced by contemporary concerns about gender, power, and violence. As new voices enter the discourse, the narrative expands, incorporating perspectives that were previously overlooked. This evolution shows that while the facts remain the same, our understanding of them can change, deepening our empathy and enriching our conversations about justice and humanity. When contemplating the legacy of the Black Dahlia, it is important to recognize the broader context of unsolved crimes. There are countless other victims whose stories have been lost to time, whose names we do not know. Their cases may never receive the same attention or resources as the Black Dahlia, yet each deserves justice and remembrance. By acknowledging this, we can honor the memory of Elizabeth Short and all those who have been victims of violence, even when their stories fade from public consciousness. In the end, the Black Dahlia remains a haunting reminder that not all mysteries are meant to be solved. Some serve as cautionary tales, warning us of the dangers that lurk beneath the surface of glamorous facades. Others inspire introspection, urging us to examine our priorities and values. The case endures, not because of the grisly details, but because it encapsulates so many aspects of human experience: hope and despair, beauty and brutality, ambition and vulnerability. It is a story that continues to unfold, inviting each new generation to reflect on its meaning and its lessons. Conclusion. A mystery that endures. In recent decades, advances in forensic science have revolutionized criminal investigations. Techniques such as DNA profiling, blood splatter analysis, and computer-aided crime mapping have solved cases that were once considered unsolvable. Cold case units now re-examine evidence from decades-old murders using modern technology, sometimes bringing justice long after the crime was committed. Despite these advancements, some cases remain elusive. The Black Dahlia murder is one such case. The evidence that could potentially identify the killer has either been lost, contaminated, or deemed insufficient for modern testing. The passage of time has reduced the likelihood of finding new witnesses or leads. Nevertheless, the case serves as a reminder of the need for meticulous evidence preservation and the importance of pursuing justice, even decades later. Unsolved crimes like the Black Dahlia continue to captivate the public imagination. They represent a puzzle that invites speculation and investigation. They also remind us that real lives are at the center of these stories. It is easy to get caught up in the intrigue of a mystery, but it is crucial to remember the victim's humanity and the family members who seek closure. The Black Dahlia case has taken on a life of its own, transcending its status as an unsolved crime to become a cultural touchstone. It encourages us to reflect on how we consume true crime stories, how we treat victims in our narratives, and how we view the role of law enforcement. By understanding the history and context of this case, we can approach it with empathy and a desire for truth, rather than mere sensationalism. More than 75 years after the Black Dahlia murder, the case remains unresolved. Modern forensic science has provided new tools and new theories continue to emerge, but there has been no definitive breakthrough. The enduring mystery is a testament to the challenges of solving crimes in an era before advanced technology and standardized investigative procedures. The Black Dahlia case endures because it encapsulates a particular moment in history, an intersection of post-war optimism, the allure of Hollywood, the limitations of law enforcement, and the dark side of human nature. It is a story of a young woman whose dreams were cut short and whose death captivated a nation. The case invites reflection on the nature of crime, the role of the media, and the need for compassion when telling stories of tragedy. As we look back on the events of January 1947, we are reminded of the fragility of life and the ways in which history can shape our understanding of justice and morality. The Black Dahlia's mystery may never be solved, but it continues to inspire introspection and dialogue about our society, our media, and our values. Good night, my friends. Sleep tight.